one of the big stories this week was OpenRouter gets acquired by Stripe. Pretty crazy. I think they were hitting 140 million in ARR, which is like 3 billion in tokens roughly on their kind of 5% model. So pretty trippy. Software is almost going to become a commodity because your productivity is going so fast in engineering. You can release products very quickly, and then it's even faster to copy, right? So if your competitor comes out, so he's like, you're going to have parity in the market with a lot of different providers. And so your sales engine is going to be even more important, and it's going to come down to trust. And so it's a people in enterprises, like it's always been a people to people business. But you didn't travel this week, but you just had the tropical storm this week.
Yeah, we pretty gnarly came through. And then we're supposed to get another two. So another one this weekend and then another one following. And both of them are still in ex-hurricanes, which it broke up right before it landed, but still we had 70-mile-per-hour winds and it took down so many trees. And so I can't imagine if a true category.
How long were you without power?
So we live somewhat, I guess you can consider it the mountains. And so like mountains get it much worse because that's what breaks it up. So our power went out like 3 p.m. on Saturday afternoon before like the storm actually hit, just like the winds that were coming. And then the storm hit like at 10 and then like 3 a.m. It was gnarly. It was bad, but it lasted till like 6 a.m. And then the power was out and we live close to the city too. So our powers restored pretty quickly, but then internet was out till like mid-afternoon Monday. And then cell towers were out too. I think after that, I'm going to go invest in Starlink. Probably slaughtered that right there. The
Starlink for the SpaceX internet offering.
Yeah. Cause one, like the power
Not
was
Amazon out. Leo.
Or I guess I got to look into it. Yeah. But yeah, when power came back on, we still didn't have internet and cell towers were down. So it's need to set up a mesh network off my Starlink and then pump the whole city.
I hear great things. So how long were you without power? 24 hours, 48 hours?
It was probably a little under 24, but
okay.
Internet, it was almost. So that's Saturday into Monday noon.
And now so all of our TV, it's all streaming at this point. So yeah, our house can't do anything. So we have solar panels and a battery pack. And it is really nice because in Texas, you'll have brownouts and sometimes you'll have the storm. It'll knock us out for 3 to 6 hours, which really sucks when it's hot and your AC can't run. So it's actually been really nice. We still have pretty affordable electricity rates, so it's not a great ROI, but it is just nice to have it. I need to probably do an energy check on my house, but I digress. Yeah, so one of the big stories this week was OpenRouter gets acquired by Stripe. Pretty crazy. I think they were hitting 140 million in ARR, which is like 3 billion in tokens roughly on their 5% model. So trippy. And that's your boy Alex, who you worked with at DeepSea. It's a cool exit.
And then Ramp came out like, I think the same day or the day after, and they're like, me too. Here's our AI router.
Yep. Yeah, they said 3 years in the making. I actually did a research and I'm working on, as I mentioned, just a 5-minute video on explaining what LLM routers are. And it's mostly what it sounds like, right? You have a request, you have some logic, and then it routes it to the model that's most appropriate. Some of the benefit being the cost savings after the token maxing era. But what I was surprised about is how many routers are out there. There's LLM router, there's light LLM, there's OpenRouter, there's Portkey. Every hyperscaler has their own router. It's like Amazon Bedrock has intelligent prompt routing. And so it's interesting if you want self-hosted, if you want managed, how much does it cost? And then there's a whole factor of scale and latency. So if you're doing 1,000 calls a day, you're probably fine. And your use case is that not that timely or latency sensitive versus if you're doing 1,000 a minute and it's all in a call center. And so you've got customers waiting for responses. So it's interesting. There is an overhead in terms of latencies. But yeah, that it's going to publish on the Fringe Lines YouTube channel as well. But it's interesting. The A16Z article, I think they interviewed Alex and the Stripe folks because they're talking about how they do building. And I guess their whole thing is tokens are the new cash. And so Stripe's angle was immediately, one, they can monetize it immediately, but like helping customers around this like new cost of intelligence was interesting. So it's, yeah, I'm not a payments guy, but it's a good exit for Alex.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
else to say?
Team over there. Congratulations. Yeah. The weaving like ramp back into it, there was a couple of posts I saw on I guess like the analogy or that what they were trying to relate, because they said, okay, like ramp already has hundreds of thousands of CFOs, and let's call it enterprise. So ramp is going after enterprise AI, whereas the OpenRouter was like your startup and AI native uh, teams. So now Stripe has like the startup org for AI native. So it's like who will win, and which one will win that market share.
Yeah, it's so early in the race, right? It'll be interesting. Moats are a big discussion as we talk about. I don't know where the moats are in in OpenRouter as an aggregator and marketplace, but I think they got the timing right. They've been building this for a while. I just So I think of when I think of OpenRouter, I think more prosumer than anything, honestly, because you were in startups at AWS. I'm in essentially X startups at AWS, and it doesn't make most of the people that are building on on a hyperscaler. So if you're building on AWS, why would you not use Bedrock? I guess is my point. Because you can get all the Anthropic models. You don't have to punch out. You get to stay on the private space. We have strong governance. Same thing if you're an Azure customer, you can use OpenAI models and Anthropic. If you're a GCP customer, you can use Anthropic. I don't know if OpenAI is on GCP yet, at least the non-open weight models, but Gemini. So I guess I would be surprised if you have a 50 million ARR startup. Do you think they're using OpenRouter? If they're spending $10 million with AWS, like why would they not use Bedrock?
Hopefully the startup AEs are after them and talking to them to make sure. 'Cause
They
I'm,
are. I can tell you, right? I can tell you the emails that I get on what we should be doing. I'm sure they're getting to. So,
yeah, but yeah, to your point, no, I hear you. But I guess too, it goes back to the AI. 'Cause I'll use us, like where I currently sit is like, we're not on Bedrock. And I know we're spending a pretty penny. Um,
you are
yeah, 0x.
interesting. All right. Well,
So
there's a counterpoint.
yeah, but it's not to say that you're not correct.
But are
Um,
you buying through OpenRouter or are you first party?
Yeah, and we're not even using OpenRouter, but I'm just using an example of like, we're just not even using OpenRouter. We're just straight like using Claude, and it should be on Bedrock, which probably would be the most cost effective is when you look at it for like EDP, because I know it would calculate into like enterprise pricing we get. So there's that whole world as well. But yeah, it's an interesting space. Cause again, like to your point, okay, why would anybody use Ramp? Because they're like, oh, they're going to get the CFOs and enterprise. But then it goes back to your point of like, all those enterprise and CFOs are probably already talking to AWS, and why wouldn't they just have it on Bedrock?
Yeah, I think so AWS is, from what I've read, is in a good position. I don't have any insights to capacity, but just based on CapEx build out and power, and then just raw chips, so NVIDIA or Trainium, we have a lot of compute. And so I think there's a little bit of been a consolidation for AWS customers onto Bedrock. That being said, though, just not to go too much in the weeds here, but you can also buy Claude Enterprise, which is your Claude desktop, your cowork, and all that via Marketplace with AWS as well. So that's actually how one of the reasons I'm having so much success this year is I do have Bedrock consumption, which you can do essentially Claude code with Bedrock, but you can also just buy Claude Enterprise, which is first party. It goes to the marketplace, and that's another way to do it. But I don't know how long that'll stay compensation agnostic or channel neutral for all the hyperscalers, because Anthropic, just based on all the announcements, you don't know where they're going to be hosting it. Is it AWS? Is it Google? Is it SpaceX? Is it their own data centers? Is it CoreWeave? So it's getting murkier and murkier.
CoreWeave. That's a first I've heard CoreWeave in a long time, but
Their stocks done, I think, pretty well. I haven't checked it recently, but they had that dip and then they ratcheted back up. So
yeah, no, it's good on them. They're another one of those ones that like sort of did a pivot at a perfect time and now have come out on top.
yeah, truly. All right, there's two things that I thought would be interesting to chat about. One is this new buying journey and just how it's changing in the age of AI. But and then the other one is on GTM efficiency. There's a great article that came out. Do you have it? And I know you've done some work on GTM publications this week. Any preferences on which one you want to go with first?
Native.
Which
So,
one?
oh no, I just said I'm an opinionated. So let's just,
Okay, cool. So this was on Only CFO. It was a guest post and like AI native versus like floating highways. And so his analogy was back to the Flintstones and the Jetsons. And you imagine the Jetsons having all this amazing tech and flying cars, but then you're still sitting at a stoplight. So did you just AIify your whole GTM org, or did you actually, oh, okay, we don't need to have stoplights in the sky or reimagine? So it was interesting. He's talking about activity per rep used to translate to pipeline, but now with agents, activity is cheap and essentially infinite, right? So just imagine all the activities we can do. Channels are being saturated. And so there's actually like a shift from like to more intent is happening in the middle to end of funnel because top of funnel is just over gamed, which I thought was interesting. And so this whole like weighting of different pipeline, which top of funnel has always been weighted less, but it's interesting back to your garbage in, garbage out. If you have a bunch of activities that are cheap to do, don't have a lot of value, it looks busy, but there's not actually much of a value accrual and therefore like probably not a lot of revenue. So it was interesting, like this whole system of like really trying to track the revenue dollars that it would be attributed to the human versus the agent. And so like I think that's a trend we're going to see continue into the future. And I think it's going to lean more towards the human.
yeah. Yeah. There was weaving Grok bot into this. There's been a lot of hype around that this weekend. And somebody had posted and said something like, oh, I've been managing people for 20 plus years and I've been using Grok bot for 4 hours. And I can tell you that having agents running my operations is 24/7 is far more efficient than managing humans. So just like who knows, agents or humans win.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought you were saying Grok was saying that. I have 20 years of management experience, so that's why I started laughing. But that's notorious, right? Just being a manager of humans sucks because you inherit all the problems as well. So it'll be interesting, but at least I guess I always over-index on enterprise sales, and so I think I was one of my customers. Their CEO was on a podcast, and then we were chatting this week, and I just said, "Hey, I really enjoyed it." I just thought his point of view was essentially software is almost going to become a commodity because your productivity is going so fast in engineering, you can release products very quickly, and then it's even faster to copy, right? So if your competitor comes out, so he's like, you're going to have parity in the market with a lot of different providers. And so your sales engine is going to be even more important and it's going to come down to trust. And so it's a people in enterprises, like it's always been a people to people business. And so we were on the phone this week just with some of our executives, and he echoed the same thing. And I was like, oh, it's really interesting because it's also going to suck for us as reps. If everyone's got feature parity, how do you compete? And this, like the GTM efficiency article is interesting. We talked, I think, last week about there was this one loop to produce an outcome, right? And it was an agent loop. And they spent something like $4.50, but the incremental returns of all the tokens after $1.40, the task didn't get better. So you just wasted $3. So I think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny. We just saw this with the LM routers to drive cost efficiency. The LM gateways are going to have observability on top of it. And so even when you're pumping all these tokens into these systems, this article called out which AI dollars, aka tokens, trace to specific closed won revenue and which are just waste. So it's not going to be just enough to be like, oh, we spent $10,000 this month on our GTM engine, but okay, how do we attribute of the $10,000? What's the 20% that moved the needle? And then let's turn down the other 80%, right? So I thought that was just interesting in terms of we're in the industry of what's coming. And then the other one that I thought I want to get your take on is incentivizing reps, your best reps, to essentially institutionalize their gut information or their gut knowledge and feelings into the system. And so let me quote this: your top performing reps at the front of the bell curve often work in the dark. They have a gut feel that drives them to make different decisions, and that judgment isn't captured anywhere. So when they leave, that knowledge leaves too. And so essentially, that judgment should be an asset in your system. So they're actually talking about creating like spiffs to that gives top reps payout based on their data added to the model, which is then helping that company build an asset. So I don't know how you feel about that, but we are financially operated. The AI quota this year, I was not excited about. I'm making money from now. It's definitely changed my behavior. So I'm curious.
I guess I just don't understand how you would do that, because to me that goes back to the human portion, because how can I articulate my "all right a lot"? Because that's what I say, "all right a lot" as the LP, right? Like you have that gut feeling, write a lot, have strong judgment and good instincts. They seek diverse perspectives and work to disconfirm their beliefs. So like that's your gut. Like I just know that innately, like when I'm talking or working through a deal. Okay, hey, babe. And I guess I could do my mental model, but how would I articulate that to
I
an
don't.
a model?
Yeah, I think it's a healthy skepticism, right? Because I was talking to a buddy of mine about he's started his own firm. He sold his firm. I think I've mentioned before. He works in landscaping tree services, and he's an arborist. And so he's working for the company that acquired his firm. But his background's actually engineering, so he's got a technical inclination. And so he just hears me talk about it, mostly about the money. He's like, "Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. How hard could it be?" Thing, and I tell him it's not. It's There's nothing that's hard. I think the value that sometimes I bring is I've been doing this 20 years and I've just been in technology for 20 years and I've worked for a services firm, a data center firm, infrastructure. So I just know the stack. So when I go into conversations, I have a broad base of generic information that helps me navigate technology orgs that he doesn't have, which is the institutional knowledge. So long way of saying, I don't know how you do that because I still, most organizations that are non-transactional still struggle with garbage in, garbage out. So it's how, and then how would you trust this rep's gut versus that rep's gut? What if the rep's gut is bad? And does that mean all your top reps have good gut instincts? Or are they just frauding the company?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't know, but interesting one.
I
But
don't
yeah,
know if the hypothesis there is interesting because it was a fairly forward-looking piece and somewhat abstract in terms of how you would do it. It wasn't a how-to guide, but I thought it was pretty because his one of the other point was if you turn off all your AI systems today, would your GTM system blow up, like just stop working, or would it just slow down? And if it slows down, you essentially just peanut buttered AI on top of it. But if it just stops working, then you've embedded AI in the process and you've redesigned the process around it. So I thought that was an interesting mental model as a litmus test of how much have you done here? How good is what you built or not?
yeah. I guess too, when it talked about like the manpower or, individuals needed, and we talk about this often, is AI going to replace? And I struggle with it a lot, and just like in GTM activities too. So this week I created 2 dashboards on 2 separate days for like specific things that I was looking for, that historically I would have had to have gone to like my data scientist team just to pull the data, and then to put it together visually, how it was put together through an interactive dashboard. I'd have to pull in either that addition, like that same data scientist, or engineering. So the question is, did I just have high agency and went above and beyond, and we wouldn't ever really need that headcount? Because if I had to, these dashboards weren't necessarily needed, but they're an addition to and help give greater insight. Or would have I just struggled through and done it, and it would have taken me a few weeks, right? I guess some question is like, the stuff that we're doing with AI, is it removing headcount, saying we're missing that headcount because if I didn't have AI, would I need that headcount? Or is it just like we're finding more, it goes back to productivity, like, oh, now I can do this, so I will do it. Like now I can pull all this data and not manipulate it, but I can structure it and format it into an ingestible method that works. And I can do it now within 10 minutes versus needing to route a bunch of people. And what if I relied on people who just said, oh, I don't need to even do this. I don't need to
Yeah.
fucking my time on this.
Truly, that's the hard part. Again, I think I overgeneralize it. It goes back to measuring the output of the firm, not the task. but you got to start somewhere. And that's how organizations move iteratively, right? They usually don't step function change. So yeah, I think you got to start somewhere. So it'll be interesting. So a lot of the tools are creating knowledge graphs now for each user. And I'm wondering when Big Brother is going to reach in and see what people are doing to pull out trends of how the team should be reorganized. It's, yeah, dude, it's interesting. So but so maybe pivot on that's impacting the ICs at the field and the GTM and the process changes over time. There was this interesting article that came out from G2, and it essentially said that the buying journey has changed and the bottleneck is now evaluation. And so I like this. There's this quote. Let's see. Sangeet Chowdhury observes in one of his books. It says, quote, constraints aren't simply eliminated from a system. They typically move to other parts of the system, right? Just like a manufacturing work in progress, theory of constraints, right? So if you just remove one constraint, part of the whole system, but the throughput doesn't flow across the system, which is essentially what you were talking about, then your output doesn't change. And so therefore the productivity improvement doesn't help the firm. It just helps that person at the stage, right? And then you just have more backup somewhere else. But so because some of the key takeaways from this were AI economics are breaking SaaS pricing, right? Because it used to have 80% plus gross margin. Once you allocated a seed, it was just support and some hosting costs. And now every time they use a credit, you incur a real cost. So that was one, the price of intelligence. Also, the buyers are just going through the due diligence faster. They're building their short list of who to consider, having your AEO, your, what is it, AI engine optimization stuff to get on the list is actually supposedly the easy part, which I would argue over time will not be easy because there's going to be so many software firms with all the same features or on paper, which also pointed to they called out buyers having a misunderstanding of the platform because they've listened to this third party. How many times have you gone and asked for some recommendations about a new technology, a new widget, right? I don't know about you, but I do it all the time and be like, hey, I haven't heard of this firm. What do they do and who are their top competitors? And then I'll go look at them, right? It's me what they do, but talking to a rep. And it's so confident. It's one of the big things. I think you're like the lawnmower or something. That's for train thought. So so the biggest, longest part of the cycle now is actually consensus building and IT security reviews. So once you get there, it's demoing the features earlier on, show them how to use it, show the outcomes, but then also tell them how you're going to safeguard their data, how help them build internal consensus. Also budgeting. Hey, this show me how my $1 million is not going to go up. You've estimated this many tokens. I don't want to pay $1.5 million. So it just kind of, the first thing I think of is how much it's going to suck to do our jobs in the future because we're going to be just battling with peers over this where there's not as much of a competitive advantage. It's going to be interesting, man. Like there's still the same number of buyers out there and it's going to get more cutthroat.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know but I think the same as it's just a new field to play on, different game, but the same. You just got to score. Everything is like just selling, and whether you're selling commodities or cloud, now you're just selling AI tokens.
Tokens. Now that
Yeah.
there's 8 labs, Chinese models. Are y'all using the Chinese models at all?
No.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that's using them. I think Amazon just announced GLM 5.2 or 5.3 in Bedrock, so it's managed by us. It's open weight, but still, I don't know. It's not open source. It's a bit of a black box, but still. So yeah, it's also there's a couple interesting comments out there. Also, the CFOs are pressuring for 12-month contracts, and they're also reversing decisions that were pre-approved. So either they came in and said, no, it's not good enough. There's this whole consolidation rationalization where because the software budgets are increasing year over year pretty dramatically. And now most organizations have a dedicated token budget or AI budget for token related type tools like Claude Code or API based. So they're trimming other places. So it's like, you can't just like rest on your laurels as a renewal rep because you're probably going to have a pretty competitive fight next time around. So it will be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too, tying into like the CFO conversation and the budgets. I'm curious because this came up a few times this week. Just personally, I was talking to others that are sellers who actually aren't using, and I was surprised that aren't using like AI or Claude to the level that like you and I do or that we talk about, and almost just like we're dismissive as though it's just like a chat bot. I wonder too with a lot of orgs is all of this AI spin is still just sitting with engineering of like the codexes of the world. You know what I'm saying? Like that it
Yeah.
hasn't really spawned out to, and and maybe it's because I work in a startup and we're like trying to push be more like everybody here from HR to engineering is using it. But when I had these conversations with account executives this week, they were like, "Oh, I don't use Claude like that." And I was like, "Oh, like you just use copy and paste for your like improve your like email, which is fine." But yeah, so I guess a question too, like, will budgets need to expand because right now it's only the engineers using it?
I got to, so OpenAI published their signals, which is like their ramp data. So let me just pull this up. The the early adopters, the high agency, the gap between them is insane. So I'm going to pull up this graphic real quick and we'll explain it so anybody that's looking or listening, not watching. This is probably going to be too small, but all right. So all industries, so there's the frontier firms are in blue, top 10% of enterprises, and typical firms, middle 10% of enterprises. So think the average or the median, right? So can you see this all right? I just want to make sure. I know
Yeah,
it's,
it's a little small, but yeah.
yeah. Okay. So we'll just read it. So all industries, the gap between the top 10% is, so the top is 17.1x, and then the median is essentially 2.1x. So an 8.3 gap is what they're saying, like 8 times, right? So 2.1 times 8.3 is 17.1. In information, it's 11, almost 12 times gap. So median about the same, 2.8, but in information technology, to your point, the engineers are just like AI pilled 32 times, 32.5x. So then they got the other two industries. So it's kind of, it is, there's just this massive gap between the top 1% slash top 10% and everyone else. And so it'll be interesting how that plays out. And then there's this other one on plugins and skills, which I don't know if I use plugins. Is that just MCP servers? But essentially, OpenAI, 95% of OpenAI uses plugins, and then 93% uses skill on a regular basis. When you go from OpenAI to that same top 10% that we talked about of 35x, it drops to 21% and 19% for plugins and skills. And then typical firms, it drops another to 9 and 3%. So it's just this massive cliff from the labs to the top 10 to everyone else, the middle of the pack. So it's this interesting opportunity, it feels like, for this massive arbitrage in productivity, at least.
Yeah. And I wonder how much, and it's probably only a minuscule amount, but when I look at that, so for me, I don't use I don't use any plugins or skills on my OpenAI Chat GPT, but on my Claude, I have all of my skills. But
Yeah.
I still use OpenAI for work as well. So we have Claude and OpenAI, and I use both. But I use OpenAI differently than I use Claude, and so
Yeah.
it would skew that view. Whereas, oh, this guy's not accelerating, but I fall in that bucket with the Claude.
No, that's a fair point. I don't know the data. I guess my assumption here was this is for more for Codex, so they're a Codex customer. But to your point, there are a lot of companies that sign up for ChatGPT subscriptions, but they don't use Codex, so it could be a little skewed. But I use plugins. If plugins are what I think they are, the connectors and the MCP servers, dude, that like 20x is my productivity versus a chatbot. Just because it has all the context of your company and your systems and the tools that you need to use, it just enables you more. Skills, I've done some interesting like review skills. They're cool. I need to lean in more there, but so it's interesting. But great point on the jagged edge of like adoption is crazy, and then it's falls off a cliff.
I think
So
too, we assume a lot because we talk all the time, and I guess you call us AI native GTM.
yeah, that's exactly
So
what we are, bro. So, well, I want to show you. So we were chatting before. So I took the video that we're going to talk about. Doom said, hey, why don't you throw that presentation into NotebookLM, create an infographic to share it online. Cool, let me do that. So I did this real time. It looks cool. I don't know how helpful it is. Good AI slot for LinkedIn, maybe. But then, oh man, they have some. identity, and I don't know what words this is. So not perfect. So then our lovely Doom here was like, hey, why don't you now give it to Claude and see if it can make it better? So I also have a design system that I built in Claude Design, and I import that into certain projects to try to get more consistency on the output. And so it doesn't look so, oh, this was AI slop graph. And so let me pull this up. So this is what it came up with post, which I thought was pretty cool. And then again, this is more representative of the brand.
And it doesn't look as AI slop, which some AI slop is fun to look at because it's all flashy, but this is clean. This looks like solid one pager type.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it still struggles with these boxes, the overlays with the text being out of them, but you could clean that up with a pass. But yeah, I find this one more aesthetically pleasing, and it's easier to process the data. You will see more infographics from us, apparently, and it'll actually look like it. So highly recommend creating a design system. I think, what is it? Clay came out with their manifesto or memo about writing should be your own. You should stand behind every line, every sentence. Writing is thinking, and all that jargon. So this is a way to make sure it's on guardrails that are for Quinn or Doom or you, right? So I think that was interesting.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, but you mentioned a skill right there. So I think earlier you said you're not using skills too much, but that is a skill.
Oh, is it?
Like
Okay.
the design brief is a skill. You said because you gave it your design brief, right?
Yeah, I uploaded it to the project files for context.
Yeah. And so those, unless you do that, and I think it's just growing out of, you don't even need to call this skill now, but before it was like backslash and then the skill and it would pull it. But now I think it's just getting so smart that it has a context. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I have to go reference. Because it's the same as, and I published that one WBR skill, but I tested it too, to your point. I went into another window and I was like, do you remember the WBR skill we did? And then it was like, oh, do you want me to do that right now? And it didn't even ask me to run the skill because I
Okay.
didn't know. So it's interesting though, but and then the segue back to what we were talking about with us being AI native. I also, that the reason it prompted to do that one is because I was talking to an AE who's not using Claude or how we are. And I was like, here's an example, dude, this is what I do just with like my WBR. And he's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. So I'd already wrote that blog post a while ago. And so I did the infograph because I was like, this is like stuff you can do, man.
Yeah, it's crazy to think. We've been real lucky with it. We don't have Claude at work per se, but we have Quick, which is fantastic for us. It's so crazy to think just something like the 2 or 3% of households really understand all the power of these tools beyond just a chatbot. So many people just view it as Google AI search as generative AI. It's so different. All right, let's end with two graphs from A16Z. I thought were pretty interesting. One's about Texas. It's actually more than Texas, but I thought this was interesting. So this is the estimated share of state level private non-residential construction. So just not money spent on not building houses, everything else, right? And it's a percentage of overall construction in the state. So you can imagine 60%, this says 60% of the funding is non-residential of all construction spending, which is high, but New Mexico's not spending a ton of money, right? So it's just disproportionate. Whereas Texas is, I don't know, what is this, maybe 13. Now the red dots are gigawatts under construction. Texas is 14 gigawatts under construction. The next highest one is Virginia at 11, and then everybody else is essentially sub 5. It's
That's like
insane.
off the chart.
Yeah, like complete outlier. I'm trying to see, but I don't see Cali on
That's,
here. Too much regulation.
is that all Tesla or like Elon and his push?
I don't know. No, I think it's data centers and power plants. So Texas is deregulated energy market. Texas has ERCOT, where there's only 3 grids in the United States, and Texas is its own. So there's East, West, and Texas. So I think you combine the state's background on lack of regulation, the governor's incentives that he's pulled over the years, the energy market itself, and then just we have a lot of data centers here as well because we have cheap power. And so I think just it's a confluence of all those factors that make it easier to build. Again, Virginia is another massive. I think they have the most data centers, so I think that's why Virginia is doing as well, because people are asking for more raised floor space to host GPUs. So those don't surprise me. It was just the scale of it blows my mind.
Not know
And
the Texas's laissez-faire stance on that. So that makes sense why Enron was based out of Texas.
Are you going to hit us with that? And run. That's our fault too now.
If they were power traders, that's what they did. But anyways, yeah.
Let's,
Sorry today.
we'll move on. All right, last slide here. So this is pretty interesting. Everybody loves Zapier, N8N, Make. Back in the day, like last year.
Yeah.
This has been insane. This is this year, week over week declines. So all of these website visits is down 11%, I think, year to date. So Gumloop is the only one showing positive group growth. I hadn't even heard of them, but dude, just look at this. I think
Yeah.
this is directly attributable to people, the prosumers building agents, because essentially you don't have to use an automation tool. You just ask the agent, give it some tools and say, figure it out.
Yeah. That was my sentiment. Because I using Zapier in the past and stuff, but a lot of times I just was like, I would like to do this or go build this flow, but it was just like, one, I don't have the time. I know what I want to build. I know how I want this to do, but I don't have the time and I don't want to troubleshoot. So I would just not pick up a lot of projects. But now to your point, like if my MCP is set up, like I just go into Claude and like the dashboards I built that I was using example earlier that weren't needed, but I built and pulled data from our revenue database and populated like a HTML dashboard. I would have needed Zapier to do in the past. And that would have just took me forever.
Forever to build, troubleshoot, debug, and then the outputs like, oh, why is this funky? I remember in Make, just so many of add module to look up this parameter from this Google folder ID to patch this ID to save it to this. And now every Claude or Codex task is essentially a whole Make automation you never have to touch. And it's completely fungible with natural language.
And I'm publishing another infographic based on your like push to say, hey, do this. So I put the Substack out months ago. I think
My
it was the
fault.
first one. No, it's a good one. You're encouraging, but I put the Substack out. I think it was like the first one I did was like my daily briefing. And it's okay. I go into Gmail, have it scrub for leads, talk to emails I need to respond to, scrub for spam, don't surface those, go into my Salesforce, pull any new leads, also pull any opportunities that are closing or haven't been active for the last some day, blah, blah, blah. But all that would have been like a Zapier. Like I'd had to go and like piece all that together just to send me like, and then go make my own HTML dashboard to look at that in the morning. I just went into Claude and was like, hey, connect this, do this. This is what I'd like to see.
Done. Yeah, it's game changing, man. Yeah, there's still a need, I would say, for those workflows to be deterministic, right? I think there are some things that you're going to want, but who's to say that Anthropic or OpenAI is not just going to release a deterministic tool, GUI process tool like software, right? And here's how you manage your tasks, and it gives you a visualization of it, and then tell it. It's not that hard to imagine this world of essentially you have an N8N embedded in Claude, just like Claude Design came out a couple months ago. Yeah, man, it's crazy world we live in.
Yeah. And maybe I'm a little bit more bearish on those because like I feel it's already there. Like I have my daily schedule for like reading and websites for certain data that I want populated. Like I have like
Oh
this
wow.
daily thing for like the Fed net reserve, and it goes and pulls it and it delivers it to me at 6 a.m. and then it puts it into a folder to save it for. So it's already doing it for me. So maybe I'm just completely too bearish on it, but I don't see the need for any of those tools anymore.
Yeah, I don't build workflows for a living, but I wouldn't want to be on the sales team there. That's for sure. Like, can you just imagine every day waking up and hating your life? Like, why can't an agent do this? You're like,
Yeah,
what?
you're like, I can. Here, let me show you how to do it.
Yeah. Let me
I'm
read from
really.
my first call deck.
Oh, all right.
Good time. I think that closes us out. Stay tuned. We'll have more videos breaking down some of these topics, little explainers. If you've got anything you're interested in, hit us up. We're also we're working on a day in the life of talking to some of the top B2B tech sales reps out there, individual contributors. So really want to get a feeling from the field of how did they get into sales? They obviously must have an AI tool. How is adoption going? Competition? What's working? What are they using in their daily life as a top sales rep? So I think we got a good network of AWS sellers, Databricks. I think if you work at Clay, let us know. Salesforce. So anyways, so go ahead and please subscribe, like, comment, and we'll tune in next week.